Welcome back to Viewpoint. For part 2, we're here at the University of Gibraltar for Gib Cyber, the second edition of an event that brings together speakers from the US and the UK to discuss cyberspace, internet, our mobile phones, computers. We know about the opportunities and the things that we do with those devices, but what about the risks and the challenges that we need to deal with as a society? Commissioner of Police Ian McGrail, why is cybersecurity such an important topic for the Royal Gibraltar Police?
Well, we have to keep ahead with the times and technology, and since the inception of the World Wide Web, criminality and the criminal landscape has shifted considerably. So therefore we have to try and keep apace with that.
What are you trying to achieve with today's Gib Cyber conference?
Well, there's a myriad of issues that are being discussed. From my perspective, what we want to generate is a lot more awareness and in fact ask for participation to assist in creating that protective environment, that preventive environment, and immediately also prepare for what's to come, because we don't know what's coming around the corner. There is a virtual community out there, and therefore we are also duty-bound to police that virtual community.
We've had some young speakers, Ruben Paul in particular, really sort of giving an insight into how different this topic is for a young generation and how much they are experiencing it firsthand as part of their everyday lives. How important is it to have them on board, the Bayside team, the Westside team as well, to make sure that digital and cybersecurity is something that is being tackled as a society?
Well, the theme of the summit today is the future is in your hands, and they are our future. So just an example of the magnificent Ruben Paul, a 12-year-old boy who's been able to demonstrate those hacking skills, albeit ethically today to us. But they are worldwide. There's probably around silent Ruben Pauls around with capabilities that they are breeding for ill intent. And it's those that we want to keep abreast and sort of keep a lid on. But to nab those and to catch those, you need the equivalent. The equivalent with those with the right ethics. And therefore, I think the work that Stuart Harrison and the Cyber Centurion team at Bayside are doing is exceptional. I think the local communities embraced their capabilities, and what we want to see is them protect Gibraltar. And therefore opportunities for them, if possible, arising locally should be harnessed, and they should be given opportunities here, my view.
Well, you're actually taking that idea one step further, and you're actually thinking that there might be an opportunity for non-police people with IT, cyber skills to work with the RGP to tackle crime.
Yes, indeed. I've today announced a new initiative that I want to roll out, that of the Cyber Cop, which is modelled on the Special Constabulary, a voluntary sort of attribution to the policing, but more on the high-tech cyber crime field. I think there's a lot of talent out there who feel and who are community orientated, who feel that they can provide some assistance, because we do not know it all at the end of the day. People expect high outputs from us, but we do not know it all as police officers. We are trying to improve on our capabilities, but if there are people who are willing to share their skills, I'm happy to swear them in as special constables, so that they can come in and advise and assist in complex investigations that are cyber-based.
So this would be a formal process, and they'd actually become police officers for that period of time?
Absolutely. They would potentially exercise the same powers, albeit, like I say, in a high-tech cybercrime domain, as opposed to wearing the uniform, but a cyber detective, sort of to speak.
My name is Ruben Paul. I am 12 years old and I'm a 7th grader and I live in Austin, Texas, and I have an interest for cybersecurity.
Can I ask you where that interest started?
It started when I was about 6 years old, and my dad used to train people on cybersecurity, and he realized I had potential and started expanding on that, and we learned about different topics. And
So you now do this in your spare time. You've set up an organization to help other children also get interested in hacking.
I do it whenever I have a chance. So I try it whenever time's possible. I try to make videos on simplified security topics so that other kids can learn what I'm learning.
And in order to do that, you have to actually sort of break into, so to speak, to hack into a software so you can show them how easy it is to do that?
Sometimes I do, but most of the time I make it simplified topics such as like what kids can understand. Okay. An example is hashing, and a simplified explanation of that is you have your input, in this case let's say strawberries, and you have your blender, which is your algorithm, and once you blend your strawberries, the outcome is a smoothie or the hash, and you can never get the original value back from the smoothie.
Oh, okay.
And then we draw that, after we talk about the simplified topic, we usually draw that to how that applies to you, and in this case, that is what your password is converted to. So the database or your computer has a stored hash of your password, and it checks it against whatever you enter when you type in your password. So that's what lets you get into your computer.
So how is my password stored on my computer then? Is it stored as a smoothie or as a strawberry?
Your password would be stored as a smoothie, but you type in the strawberries and then the algorithm blends it and then it comes out as a smoothie and checks if the two smoothies are the same.
Let's ask you about Gibraltar. Here at the Gib Cyber Summit, what are your first impressions of the Rock?
I think it's a beautiful city, and I love how things are so close together, and the people here are very warm. I feel like it's a very safe city, and whenever we're walking down the street trying to get somewhere, either to a restaurant or to a tourist attraction, people are always trying to guide us. Hey, are you going here? Are you going here? The street's down the straight ahead to the right or whatever. So I feel like Gibraltar is a very nice place, and I just enjoy the close-knit, tight environment, not only of the area, but also of the people.
Excellent. And the conference itself, the Cyber Summit?
Well, I realized the topic was about AI and machine learning, and I wanted to explore that a little bit more, and I thought that it was a good chance for me to learn about that more and share my knowledge on that. And it's a pretty big crowd, and I feel like lots of other good speakers are here, and it's a very good opportunity to go to a place I've never been before. So Gibraltar was one of the invitations that we got, and we selected it specifically.
What is artificial intelligence?
Artificial intelligence is basically the simulation of intelligent behavior in computers. It uses machine learning, which is a branch of artificial intelligence that tries to simulate the human brain in computers. So, notice how I said simulate, not actually put the human brain. Right. So we're trying to recreate the human brain in computers, and it's still going to take time, but I feel like artificial intelligence is going to be a big part of the future.
Okay, so I mean, I suppose as with all technology, challenges and opportunities.
Artificial intelligence opens up a brand new world, and whenever we use artificial intelligence, that's going to be incorporated in our everyday lives. So things that we use on a daily basis will use artificial intelligence, such as transportation, homes, energy, the military, even medical devices. They will all be functioned by artificial intelligence and machine learning. So if you have a heart pace monitor that is using artificial intelligence, and or you have a surgeon that is a robotic arm that knows where to go, you must make sure that it is precise and on point. Otherwise, it could be bad.
And so these are potential weak points as well if their cybersecurity isn't up for the challenge.
Mm-hmm. I believe that if cybersecurity isn't there in artificial intelligence, it could be catastrophic.
Yeah. You've talked about a heart rate monitor. It's pretty simple for somebody to put two and two together there. Yeah. You also gave an example of a self-driving car going wrong.
With autonomous cars, I feel like research is still being done and being developed, definitely to make sure that catastrophic events such as deadly crashes or things, if a hacker can do that, then that is very very bad, I guess.
Well, I mean, one of the things, if we put the idea of a self-driving car together with your hack that you demonstrated on the stage, where you changed a red light, or you didn't change the image of the red light. The image was a red light, but you told the programming to see it as a green light. I mean, if a hacker did that to a whole network of cars, self-driving cars, the result would be absolutely terrible, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So, I mean, tell us the principle that you demonstrated on stage there, how you got the machine to think that the red light was in fact a green light.
The first thing that we did is we trained the machine to think a red light is a red light. And the way we did that is we took multiple data sets of information, and in this case, input images of red lights, and the machine learned about different pixels and how clusters of those information, how a red light looks. So the image will be able to see the color value and the shape of a red light, and how it's a circle and things like that. These are some of the features. And then it'll label these as belonging to a red light. So it'll say that all those things of how a red light looks is a red light. And then we trained another model where the red light was a green light. So we trained the red light, and then we told the computer that isn't a red light, that's a green light. And that's what we did. We used that model instead of the correct model, which a hacker would do. He would input his hacking model into the framework and program. Just talking about me and my story. Now we're talking about
Yeah, so 32 years within law enforcement, primarily dealing with serious and organised crime, everything from armed robberies to murder investigations, covert policing, so all sorts of crime. Latterly, head of Scotland Yard's fraud squad and check and plastic card unit, which was a multi-agency working with UK payments. And started to see, probably about 10 years ago, how the internet was being used to commit crime, mainly through the work with the banks. And then after much of lobbying and campaigning, secured funding to set up, build and create the law enforcement capability in the UK to deal with national cybercrime incidents.
It's a massive area for policing, isn't it, that needs to be tackled?
Yeah, the scale of the problem, people quote different figures and talk about different issues. I think, we're still only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Cybercrime is something that affects all of us now, in our daily lives, in our social lives, whether it's, our social media profiles or our online banking activity. The opportunities for cybercriminality is immense. If you look at the internet, is now an integral part of everything that we do. Doesn't matter what we're doing, the internet will come across it somewhere along the lines, and that presents significant risks for us if we don't all think about cybersecurity.
So what are some of the main messages that you have brought to your keynote today?
So I think we've seen how cybercrime has become far more sophisticated. If I use the analogy of the old flying squad days when I was dealing with armed robbers, the days of crashing into organisations and just stealing the goodies and off they go. Now they're more sophisticated. They'll look at how they can actually intrude, infiltrate into organisations, come in potentially through, further outside that organisation, through the supply chain, through social media, through social engineering activity, insiders, compromise. They want to gain access, they want to remain undetected, so they can actually capitalise on what they're actually stealing, the goods that they're taking, that they're not blocked, that they're not red flagged, and that they're not alerting law enforcement or that organisation to the fact that they've been compromised. As we've seen with a lot of the major breaches recently, that breach didn't happen yesterday or last week, it happened last year or the year before or the year before that.
Quite a scary thought.
Yeah, it's only just been discovered. And quite often, that would be your credentials or my credentials that have been stolen and lost from wherever they were taken from, and they could have been misused in that time.
So let's talk about prevention first. What are your top tips?
So I think a lot of the cases that I talk about, the big who's attacking organisations and who's doing this sort of crime, a lot of that, is scary stuff, but could have been prevented or the harm mitigated with some fairly simple common sense housekeeping, if you like. What are you holding? What data have you got? How is that being protected? Who's got access to it? Who has what permissions within that organisation? Why has that member of staff got permissions to access the finance database, the HR database, across different areas of the network? So understanding what you've got, where it sits, who's got access to it, who's within your organisation. How about a bit of housekeeping? Why are you holding some of this data? Is it redundant data that you should clean, get rid of? You shouldn't be retaining it any longer. GDPR is obviously driving a lot of good cybersecurity measures, making people think and take action to improve cybersecurity. So there's a lot that can be done without thinking this is a real technical, issue and we can't stop cyber criminals. But do your housekeeping and it can, shore up the defences to a degree that maybe the cyber criminals will go elsewhere rather than attack yourself.
Sure. Okay, but let's think that perhaps it's too late for a particular organisation and they've had a breach.
Yep.
What should they do then?
So the big issue is how do you actually mitigate the harm of what's happened? If you've been compromised, if data's been taken, the big panic sets in and you need to find out when did that happen, what's actually been taken. Some organisations think, it's not banking, it's not financial credentials, that doesn't matter. It does matter because that can then be used to scam and con, those individuals that have had their data taken, and that can sometimes cause more harm because they are deemed to have been part of any subsequent fraud that takes place. So find out what's happened, what's gone, and what mitigation action you need to be doing, either to help your customers, alerting customers to the fact, credit monitoring around what's happened, obviously now reporting to law enforcement, GDPR with the information commissioners where you have data that's been breached. But I think if there's one lesson or one key thing to learn is don't wait until it happens. Do that practice now. Get things in place. What are you going to say to your customers, to your staff when that breach happens? What action are you going to take? Who are you going to call? Get that in place, test it, rehearse it, keep it fresh, keep it ready, a state of readiness, because that breach will happen at some stage and you need to be prepared for it.
Cassie, tell us a little bit about your background and your role.
So I serve as Chief Decision Scientist at Google, and I got there through a slightly unusual path, and I like to think of myself as a recovering statistician, but that's not the only thing that I studied. I also spent a lot of time looking at the decision sciences. I have degrees in economics, psychology, neuroscience. Now, the reason I did that is that data always seemed beautiful to me ever since I was little, but I felt like it needed a reason, and so decisions were that reason. Decisions are how we affect the world around us. It's by taking action. It doesn't really matter what we think we know until it influences how we act in some way. And so I felt that it was really important for me to take a decision-oriented perspective on data, data science, and statistics. And the more interdisciplinary my studies got, the better I became as a data scientist. Unfortunately, I kept all this to myself for a really long time, but when I joined Google, I had a great set of collaborative colleagues who kind of pulled it out of me, if you will, and we realized that there was something very powerful here, very necessary, a good applied perspective on data science and on machine learning that complements the research perspective. And we didn't have a name for it at first, but now we're calling it decision intelligence engineering.
You've said previously that avoiding type 3 errors is at the heart of your work. Could you explain that idea for us?
Yeah, sure. So first thing that you need to know is what statistics actually is. What most people don't realize is that it's the science of changing your mind. So your mind is set to something, and the question is, does the evidence make you want to leave that? A type 1 error is where you should just keep going and doing what you would have done anyway, but somehow you make the foolish mistake of changing your mind. You shouldn't. Type 2 error is the opposite. Should change your mind, but you don't. Type 3 error is where you're doing all this careful math and figuring out type 1 and type 2 errors in service of the wrong question in the first place. So all the right math for a useless rabbit hole. Now, unfortunately, no one really teaches you about avoiding type 3 error in these courses. They just teach you how to control the first two. So who's going to tell you what questions are even worth considering? Who's going to tell you about how to set your mind in the first place before you can start thinking about changing it with data? Unfortunately, no discipline except decision intelligence, which is what I'm really passionate about, because you see, the world is collecting so much data, and we really owe it to ourselves to make that data useful. So that means not just sitting there collecting dust, but also not being turned into answers to questions that don't need to be asked.
So you've come to Gibraltar to deliver a keynote address. What's the most important message that you want people to stay with when you speak to them about this topic?
So the world's collecting more data than ever before, and it would be a great pity if we didn't make it useful. And with the data and with all the amazing algorithms and technologies and processing power that we have today, we can do incredible things that would have seemed impossible even a decade ago. This is a time when people can really make their dreams a reality. And in order to get there, we need to all be data literate. Literacy with data and data science and machine learning is a way that people will be able to better enable themselves to be architects of their own bright future. And I really wouldn't want people to miss out on that. It is so much easier to do this all in practice than people make it sound. But we have to want to dive in. And so I really hope that people will be inspired to think about playing with it, using it, getting creative, rather than over-focusing on how to reinvent that wheel and wire that microwave from scratch. It's really an exciting time, and I want people to have fun with it.
Artificial intelligence must be a great opportunity as well as a challenge. Where do you see those opportunities taking us?
I feel like there are many new technologies that are going to be growing, and artificial intelligence, I feel like personally the next generation will be the last generation to probably be allowed to drive. After that, it will be fully automated, and artificial intelligence and other machine learning topics will impact several areas in our everyday life, so it'll change the way we live and change the way the world changes. So I think that artificial intelligence can have a big impact either for the positive side of our lives or for the negative. So we just must make sure that it's protected now, because it's still growing and still forming.
So that's why we need a society of cyber ninjas to make sure that people are like you, who understand the environment, can protect us. Tell us a little bit about your project, your organization, Cyber Shaolin.
Cyber Shaolin is my nonprofit organization, and we strive to educate, equip, and empower. And we strive to educate, equip, and empower kids and adults with the knowledge of cybersecurity dangers and defenses. So we want kids and adults both to learn cybersecurity in a simplified way, so that it's easy for them to understand and in layman's terms, and anyone can understand it and anyone can learn about cybersecurity. So I feel like it should be the portal for if anyone wants to learn, like the Khan Academy for cybersecurity. I enjoy doing lots of things, but I feel like if I can help someone, then it's better to do it now than later, right? So whenever I have the chance, I always try to make new videos, and it takes a lot of time, like at least a week or two to make the video, because you have to make all the animations, you got to put the voice in, and I use my voice, so I have to commentate all of those videos. So it takes a lot of time, but I do it whenever I have free time.
Let's think that there will be other young people watching this who will be really interested in what you're saying and hopefully even inspired. What words would you, of maybe advice, would you give them about cybersecurity and why they should be interested in it?
Well, cybersecurity is the future, and I feel like it's always good to get a good start, and there's no like specific age that you have to start. My little brother's learning about programming now, so it's good to get an early start on that, and it's good to understand cybersecurity, because that's what's going to change the world. And I feel like once you if you can help someone, then help them. And you don't have to do cybersecurity if you don't want to. If you have another passion and you're good at that, maybe I'll never be good at that, right? So always learn what you want to do and then excel at that as fast as you can.
You've reflected a bit upon your time in Gibraltar. You also picked up one of our mottos and you gave it a 21st century 2018 cyber touch.
I said, I know Gibraltar's motto is Noli expagnabilis hosti, which means no one shall expel us. And if I may take the liberty to, if that is adapted for cybersecurity, it'd be Noli expagnabilis hacker, which means no hacker shall expel us.
That's brilliant. Let's hope that that's true.
Thank you.
Real pleasure to talk to you, Ruben. Thanks a lot for your time,
Thank
man.
you.
And best of luck with everything, buddy. Brilliant. What do you think the biggest takeaway message is from today's conference?
I think it's the same as how this started, which is about the youth and nurturing the youth. There will be over 2 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs within 2 years. And so I think that although we're all grown-ups, a lot of us are parents, and we need to look at their future, their jobs, and how we nurture them into a world that really is going to revolve around them in cyber. So we've just got to prepare them for it whilst protecting our businesses as well as our livelihoods, but definitely the youth.
Computers, the internet, mobile phones, they all play an increasingly prominent role in our lives. The hope for the organisers of Gib Cyber and the Royal Gibraltar Police is that we can work together to share best practices and ideas to make sure that we make the most of these technologies while avoiding cyber attacks. I hope you've enjoyed Viewpoint's in-depth report. Next week, we'll be looking at Brexit and asking questions like, who's got Gibraltar's back in the Brexit negotiations? And is it possible for the Rock to land itself a special status, remaining both inside and at the same time outside the European Union? That's Brexit, next week at the same time on Viewpoint. That's where we leave things tonight. From the team at Broadcasting House and at the University of Gibraltar, thanks a lot for watching and good night.